Hello everyone, I'm standing in between Little Oniroa and Big Oniroa on Waiheke Island here today, and it's very lovely here in between the two beaches, as you can see behind me. Isn't it tranquil? Well, it's a beautiful day on the 30th of September, and yes, we all witnessed some interesting media tactics over the last few days. As you know, there'd been a huge outcry and an outrage over the weekend when Winston Peters took to the stage over at the United Nations 80th General Assembly in New York, and he detailed in 15 minutes, really in about 1 minute out of the 15, the position that had been concealed from the New Zealand public for the last 2 weeks when it came to whether New Zealand would recognise the state of Palestine or not right now, under the circumstances which are basically getting quite dire and look like there could actually be no possibility of a state of Palestine soon if there isn't pressure exerted around the world on Israel to shape up or basically, confront the world here. Anyway, the speech was, as you know, pretty much the status quo, and it was the old-fashioned, out-of-date kind of thinking around international law, which might have been valid about 14, 15 years ago, but is now well out of date. And it was very commensurate with the kind of thing we see from Winston Peters, sort of being out of date, out of the loop, talking about old arguments that used to stand but no longer relevant anymore. And today there's articles in The Conversation about the possibility that this will really, really affect New Zealand's standing and reputation on the world stage in relationship to this issue, should it actually take some turns for the worse in the next coming months. So basically the big news of this morning was the Post, and it really revealed that the process behind the decision making had come from the New Zealand First Party staff members writing a paper and making a recommendation on behalf of New Zealand without any real grounding in official advice, and making that recommendation to hold the course, hold the line, and this was commensurate with what would be the most popular for New Zealand First, what would win the most votes for Winston, and basically, and that is don't change, because you don't want to rock the boat for people that are quite prejudiced towards Arab people, that like to call them names and like to refer to people as subhuman beings because they're from the Arab area, and they have different names for them that I've heard, which are pretty derogatory. So this was the New Zealand First position, and they embedded their own recommendation into the paper that went to Cabinet. The Post also detailed who was in that cabinet decision. There was 5 people, and those 5, the 5 aligned with genocide, basically had interests of their own. There was Davey Boy Seymour, who had a lot of interests in his donors, many who hail back or have allegiances with Israel and Israeli businesses and Israeli investments around the world. And there was Todd McClay, who's interested in trade. So he was brought in there to really advise, will this have an impact on money, on trade flows or anything like that? Because if money comes first, and money's the most important thing to the party that's in power, not human life, then you'd want Todd in there talking about how much money we might lose and how we could get around this if we just feathered Winston's nest here. And of course, Davey Boys. We had a representative for the NZ initiative in the form of Nicola Willis, who had actually been a director of the NZ initiative up until 2017, when she suddenly just catapulted from being a member of a lobbying think tank straight into politics, and then within a couple of years she's the Minister of Finance. And we suddenly see all these senior members of the Reserve Bank resigning. We see these new appointments in Treasury, and presto, we start seeing Treasury backing up this kind of classic libertarian, neoliberal Atlas Network ideology, which involves privatisation, austerity, bringing down debt, and of course deregulation. So yes, all of those signs were there, and there was Nicola, one of the 5 aligned with genocide, and we had Christopher Luxcon, of course, who's basically demonstrated that he is quite prepared to bend over just to be the Prime Minister. And we've seen that demonstrated over and over and over again, that he's not prepared to bring any of his colleagues who are in the coalition into line. He's never going to scold them in public. He will have a conversation at most, but he'll never ever bring them into line, which means that they've got impunity to actually act really badly and to push the government around. So you've got this small party coalition environment in New Zealand where these types get to go to the United Nations and say, New Zealand says this because 6% of the vote think that this is a good idea. And so that's basically what happened, and it was a shoddy process. So that brings me on to talking about how after trying to keep that all secret and then pretending they were being transparent about it, Winston disappointed and let down the whole nation, and it was an outrage. So everyone was so outraged that the National Party began to think over the weekend, like, how can we divert? How can we throw in some red meat, or so we can bang a cat on the table in order to distract everyone's attention, to break the cycle? And we need some help from our friends in the media. So after yesterday, when we saw Christopher Luxon facing the music to some extent in the media from John Campbell, who ripped apart his spin about how, you know, there was an equal number here and an equal number there, and some of our friends say this and some of our friends say that. Well, basically today we didn't see any of that carrying on. And the conversation on Television New Zealand Breakfast this morning with Chris Hipkins started off with a topic that National had introduced as a distraction, and that was about the need to reform the strengthening of buildings around the country when it came to earthquakes. Now, Chris Hipkins basically said, yes, there is an area there where, you know, we'd over-regulated and we could, you know, be a little bit more accurate, and we may have actually gone too far. And but the devil will be in the detail with these things, as it always is, and so he's waiting on that detail. Now, that was rational and very reasonable. But what I noticed is that Jenny May, in the about 10 minutes or less that she has allocated for Chris Hipkins to speak on TVNZ, dedicated almost half of the interview to this topic that was introduced by National as a kind of a circuit breaker, really, to the conversation that the rest of the public was still processing about the genocide, you know, the outrage that the government had actually been led by the nose by Winston Peters, that they pretended that it was complicated, that there was information he needed to gather, and they kept us all in the dark and then let us all down, and how outraged we all were. So this was the media kind of dominating the conversation and trying to make us all move on. So as you can see, I'm standing in the kind of the public thoroughfare here, so people are going past. But yeah, basically this is exactly what's happening to the topic of Palestinian statehood, and that is that it's just gradually in the background, passing by media, like putting it out of our minds. And there was a section in the Jenny May interview then that got onto Palestine, but guess what? It was the shortest part of the interview. It lasted for maybe less than a minute, and it really just involved, you know, kind of prosecuting Labor for coming out and making a stand, a principled stand on how Labor would, in fact, you know, quickly recognise the state of Palestine, like our neighbours Australia have, like Canada, France, the UK, and 157 other nations now, over 80% of the world. So Jenny May wasn't interested in any of that. She just wanted to know why it wasn't done sooner. The old Chris Bishop should have done it sooner routine, to kind of pour cold water on anything good and then get the hell out of there without dwelling on it, because we're really trying to move on in the media from this topic. So the rest of that interview was really just about this letter, I think, that had been sent to Chris Hipkins by the National Party leader, Chris Luxon, who really basically wants the future to be about oil and gas exploration and bringing a lot of fossil fuels up to the surface and getting a lot of carbon emissions into the air, because he'll argue that, you know, we actually need coal and we need gas, and we're going to need those because even though we've got a whole lot of renewables here, the marketplace isn't incentivized. Money rules, really, basically. Short-term profits mean that we can't tap into the cheaper resources that we've got at our disposal. So let's keep on going with fossil fuels. Now, basically, the long and short story here is that the National Party have made up a story about how the 2018 ban on offshore oil and gas is the culprit. behind investor confidence and further exploration. But the truth was, if you look at the level of confidence that there was in exploring for gas in New Zealand, it actually started to tail off around about 2012, 2013, and it was dwindling. There were approximately something like 10 permits still existing. The Labour Party honoured all of those permits in 2018, so nobody got told that they couldn't keep drilling or looking. And this was the case. And basically at the time, and even before this, oil companies were pulling out because they'd been here drilling for 20 years and they'd basically found nothing. But the story that the National Party is trying to tell is that this is Labour's fault. Labour shouldn't have done this thing. They're trying to take this very small issue amongst all these other issues that are reasons why companies exploring for gas have pulled out of the area here after 20 years of trying to find this resource, and started to transform and adjust transition away from fossil fuels. So this game is up, and basically with the energy sector report coming out shortly, this is considered really to be a preemptive blame game, some kind of move that Luxon was trying to make where he, excuse the pun, gaslights the Labour Party and uses this cool story, which is a myth, about how the offshore oil and gas ban was to blame somehow or another. Anyway, Chris Hipkins did a fine job of like saying, hey, look, renewables are cheaper. It really wasn't this ban on offshore oil and gas that was the culprit here, that this was a preemptive move. This has nothing to do with being bipartisan. It was in fact really a distraction from all the other things that are happening. For example, this shocking decision about the Palestinian statehood. So it got Jenny May talking about this for a good 3 or 4 minutes. And the same thing happened over on Morning Report, where Chris Hipkins battled away with the facts. You know, when you're good and you're actually trying to be factual and evidence-based, what you get met with is a media who are trained to doubt anything good and doubt it and cast cold water on it because they think it's their job. It may not be the point of view that Corin Dan holds, but he's sure pouring cold water on the idea, and adding to the myth and adding to the disinformation by doing so. So that disinformation is that the blame is with Labour, and Corin Dan was saying things like, oh, well, they've had advice, but he didn't say who the advice was from, that says that investor confidence was damaged by this ban. Anyway, the ban's coming back whether anybody likes it or not, and that's democracy. And so they shouldn't have ever tried to reverse it. They put $200 million into this of taxpayer money. And as you know, it'll take them something like the good part of a dozen to 16 years, if they should find gas, which they probably won't, to actually bring it to production. So none of that time, during that time, will feature any of this gas that will relieve any of those dry years that they're talking about. So it all didn't make any sense. In the meantime, we're stockpiling coal, and we're going to put all these emissions into the air, but we're not getting into battery storage, and we're not really doing much on renewables, and we've sat on our hands for 2 years now, and it's only now that they're starting to look at the energy report. So Labour fairly said, hey, look, we're just going to sit back and wait for the government to come up with its review and its report, which is due out soon, and we'll look at the facts and we'll stick there. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that if you look at all of these things, including the Chris Hipkins on the Herald Now with Lion Ryan, basically all of those performances are about gotchas and about, you know, blaming Labour for something, defending Christopher Luxon's position, attacking Labour, saying Labour can't be trusted, undermining Labour. If Labour actually did say it was going to back Palestinian statehood, then get them explaining why it hasn't happened earlier. So it was all these kind of tactics. So anything good had to be shat on, basically, in New Zealand media if it's coming from the left. So this was the job, and Chris Hipkins did a great job of it. And as you can see, the Palestinian statehood is still alive and kicking and coming back into the picture as it walks across the back of the screen here. So we are basically still keeping that issue alive. And one of the things that kept it alive is that Trump and Netanyahu had met in the White House, and they'd come out and started talking to the press about how if Hamas don't actually take up the offer, then, you know, genocide will be completely backed by the United States, and we can wipe out everyone and everyone can be killed, and clap, clap, clap for everybody that supports Trump and didn't actually try to come to the rescue of Palestinian statehood. So this is the kind of stuff that New Zealand First voters obviously believe in, and most of the trolls on the internet that are really only interested in those 20 Israeli lives and don't give a shit about the 66,005 lives that have been lost so far in this genocide that's unfolding right in front of our eyes, while we all talk about small issues like what the letter contained that Christopher Luxon sent to Christopher Hipkins, and then quickly sent it to the media before Hipkins had even had a chance to read it. I think it had been in his inbox for 30 minutes before this was being dragged as a political stunt through the media, and everyone can see cynically that this terrible, terrible, horrible man, who is actually the Prime Minister of this country, that lies to us, to our faces, that bullshits us all the time, was playing a fucking game again. Oh, pardon my French. I'm so sorry. Excuse me for saying the word game. It's actually deliberate, and that shouldn't be tolerated. And that the media are very, very supportive and never really call him out. Like, they haven't really asked him why he doesn't mention the 65,000, 66,000 deaths, doesn't talk about the 11,000 people who are still languishing in prisons in Israel. And even today with this Trump position, where is the outrage? It's all been smoothed over. We've left it behind. It can only really be talked about for a couple of days because it may actually damage the favourite political partisan parties of the media in New Zealand, in the media and the polls. Yeah, so we don't want that, do we? So we don't want to ask those hard questions, and we haven't really gone there. It's only today that New Zealanders started to hear about these 20 points that had previously been 21 points in the plan, and now they know a little bit about these 20 points, this 20-point plan, but everyone else in the world had heard about it a week before, so gradually our media are getting around to reporting about it. So on top of all of these kind of stories that were in the news this morning, I guess that there's a couple of other topics to talk about. And but I could talk about those in a different time, and I think I'll probably really just leave it about there, other than to say that, we've got this big strike coming up on the 23rd of October, where you've got the teachers, you've got the nurses, you've got the doctors, and there's a coordination across the unions because workers are suffering in New Zealand. Workers from all sectors are being crushed and brutalised and pushed down and ignored, not listened to, and the game of doubling down by the rich and the Atlas Network on their asses, on their heads, destroying their good way of life is going on relentlessly with a media that's helping them, that's going to actually kind of cast doubt on unions. We don't like unions, we don't like workers, but we do like rich people. We like people that paid for the advertising bills, don't we? So that's coming up on the 23rd of October, so we're going to have to make a big effort. This could go wide, this could go really wide, this could become a general strike if we're all lucky, and if our voices are heard, because really our media don't want our voices heard, so we're going to have to do it ourselves. We have to take action. We have to actually say no to this government. We have to say enough, Simeon Brown, enough. Enough of this, Christopher Luxon, enough, Winston Peters, stop, David Seymour, stop, Nicola Willis, just stop, you're gone, you're out. Finished. The people speak. People power has to come to the fore. So it's great to see that happening. So I'll probably make an effort to contact some of the unions, talk to them soon. And let's keep talking about how we recognise the state of Palestine, how we're not prepared to sit around and do nothing like Winston Peters when it comes to a genocide, how we're not comfortable like the media just moving on, and let's keep that alive. So that's basically all I wanted to say today. Isn't it beautiful here in between the two Oniroas, which mean the long sands, but these are the short sands over here. And that's all I have to say today. Have a beautiful the rest of your Tuesday evening, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.